Hey guys, welcome to another episode of DnSAdventures, and today we're going to be talking about upgrades and tips that made our life easier while traveling full-time on the road. So you just spent all this hard-earned money on a new or used RV. You think you got a great deal, but you start using it and you realize there's a lot of upgrades I'm going to have to make to this thing. So that's exactly what happened to us in our first rig and also our second rig. We thought our second rig had everything we'd ever need, but turns out there were some upgrades that we needed to make. So here are just a few of those upgrades slash tips that made our life a little bit easier while we were traveling full-time on the road. One of the very first things that I purchased after we got this fifth wheel was buying covers for our vents. So the covers that cover on most of the RVs, they just have that little flap that kind of goes up and down, that whenever you're using, like, let's say here, whenever you're using like a Fantastic fan or Max Air fan, whatever brand you have, they have this little lid that pops up and goes down. Well, that's fine and dandy when it's not raining or snowing or doing anything crazy outside, but when it is, that becomes not quite usable. So they make these plastic covers that actually go over the top of this, that have little slits in the side where it allows air to go in and out, but it doesn't allow rain, any sort of precipitation to get inside your RV. So you may or may not, in this point of your RV career, heard the term China bomb. No, we're not talking about actual bombs. We're talking about tires that are made in China that the typical RV comes with initially. One thing that's pretty typical amongst all RVs, not every single manufacturer, but most RVs, they give you some pretty crappy tires to begin with. Most people new to RVing don't really think of tires being an issue. They're like, well, if they came with the RV that I bought, they should be capable of putting any load or anything that I need on this rig. Well, there's a bunch of things to think about tires as far as their tire rating. There's different plies for your tires, and there's different ratings, speed ratings, in which you can take those tires as well. So make sure you do some research before you go 80 miles per hour on a rig that's not really meant to do that. Not to mention that most rigs shouldn't be going 80 miles per hour anyway. Within a year and a half of owning this RV, we decided to upgrade to the Goodyear endurance tires. And pretty much a standard now for RVers. There's other tires you can get, other manufacturers you can get, but I haven't heard one single bad review on these Goodyear endurance tires, and they seem to be the go-to tire if you plan on upgrading your RV tires. One of the first things you should get if you're just brand new to RVing, get some nice stabilizers. You will thank yourself in the future. Unless you grew up in a yacht on an ocean, you're probably not used to the house rocking every time you take a step. They make all sorts of different stabilizers, some that help you stabilize horizontal, some, I don't know if you would call it vertical or horizontal, x-axis, y-axis, whatever you want to call it. The different ways the RV can rock, there's stabilizers for all of it. For our fifth wheel, all we've gotten so far are just little stabilizers to go in between our tires. We still need to upgrade our side-to-side stabilizers. We gotten used to it after living in this rig 2.5 years full-time, but it's still something we want to upgrade. Probably put those JT strong arms or some sort of fifth wheel stabilizer jacks on there to keep it from rocking back and forth from side to side. So when we first bought this fifth wheel, it came with a backup camera ready system. So it didn't actually have the backup camera installed on the fifth wheel, but it had a wire, a 12 volt wire running all the way back there already that was, I guess, pre-installed in order to install your own backup camera. The backup camera is probably one of the smartest things I've installed on this RV. Not for actually backing up. So as you're going down the road and you're trying to switch lanes, but you're in a heck of a lot of traffic, it helps having that backup camera just seeing exactly where the back of your RV is if you have the camera tilted properly. So when you're trying to merge lanes in the different traffic, you know exactly where that other car's front end is, so you aren't running into them. It has saved my butt so many times, especially around like Salt Lake City in Utah, when I was, right after we first got the camera installed. We got it installed when we were traveling through Idaho, and man, merging in the traffic, that is a lifesaver. Otherwise, it's kind of a, I mean, if you're an experienced driver, you know where the back of your rig is, but if you're new, it definitely helps out quite a bit. So we were probably RVing full-time for about a year before we actually got a really nice water filtration system. And we ended up going with the Berkey because it's gravity fed. You don't have to rely on anything but gravity itself to filter the water through those nice carbon filters. So before we got the Berkey, we just used those inline water, cheap water filters that you can get from Walmart, and those do filter out quite a bit. But they also get clogged fairly easy if you do go into an area that has like a lot of hard water or just a lot of gunk in their water. And as you know, water is not equal across all the campgrounds, so you have to have a very dynamic system, water filtration system, or strong enough to be able to hold out in different situations. That Berkey water filter though eliminates pretty much anything that will taste weird in your water, and also gets rid of some of that harmful stuff that the RV parks may or may not be filtering out on their own. So if you're going to be using your RV for more than just a weekend trip, week-long trip, something like that, you may want to invest in getting a water softener. That's something we kind of figured out the hard way as our lines got filled with hard water deposits, and we had to figure out a way to clean it, which vinegar is actually a pretty good way to clean out your hard water deposits in your line, but it just takes a while to do. But to prevent a situation like that happening, a water softener is a great idea, especially if you're in areas of the country where they are typically known for hard water. One thing that you really want to invest in any type of RV are some storage containers like these, or some sort of solution to keep all your items from sloshing around in the RV, because there is no rig out there that is not going to be going through a bunch of bumps while you're going down the road. So make sure you have some sort of storage container or something, especially items that are easily breakable or spillable, to keep them from tipping over while you're going down the road. And you may or may not have heard this in the background of my video the entire time, but I'm actually using a little space heater out here to film because it is very cold. But these guys are a lifesaver as far as keeping your rig warmer and not having to use all your propane in your RV to heat your RV. Some rigs come with those electric fireplaces, which I hear are great alternatives as well. If you have one of those, maybe you won't need one of these space heaters. But if you're in a mild climate and you just need to take the chill out of the air, having a space heater around, and obviously not leaving it unattended, is a great thing to have. To many of you, this is probably a no-brainer, like maybe most of these items that I've talked about already. But having a surge protector for your RV is a must. They make all sorts of different surge protectors. I'm not going to say a particular brand is better than another because I really don't know. But we have both a 30 amp and a 50 amp surge protector depending on what type of hookup that we have or what we're hooking our rig into. We have a 50 amp rig, but sometimes campgrounds only have 30 amps, so we hook up the 30 amp surge protector depending on the system that we're hooking into. Sewer system upgrades. So yeah, that's not something you want to go cheap on, because if you go cheap on it, you might be having some on your hands, if you know what I'm saying. There's a lot of cheap alternatives out there, but if you buy the cheap flimsy plastic stuff and you want to go, especially if you're full-time RVing and you're using that stuff in the winter, you got to be very careful, because that stuff can be fragile and you do not want that cracking while you're trying to loosen your load. So some of the sewer upgrades that we did, we try to get those clear elbows. I know it sounds gross, but goodness gracious, if you have a clog somewhere and you don't know where it's clogging, you don't want to open up a piece of sewer pipe and get a surprise coming out there. And having different areas where you can flush the hose and different adapters that you can hook up directly to your hose to flush stuff out. It helps maintain all of your equipment, and then also keeps from any surprises the next time you open up the equipment and you realize you forgot to clean something out. So another absolute must to be in any RV is a water pressure regulator. There's people that don't use water pressure regulators, and I have a feeling they're going to have a situation in the future that they aren't going to like. Someone's going to comment on this video and say, I've been going to RV parks for 10, 15 years and I've never had a situation. Well, your time's coming. You can buy those cheap, I think they're Camco or different brands. I don't want to call a specific brand because there's so many different brands out there. If you really want to know what type of pressure you're dealing with, I would recommend getting one with a gauge. And everything that I'm talking about today, I'll try to put a link, if I can find a link, off of Amazon or someplace where you can purchase the same thing that we're using, because everything that we use, we stick by, and it has been working great for us. So these little guys here, buy a couple of them. It has both humidity and it has temperature on here. We keep one in our rig just to see what the temperature is, to see if our thermostat's correct, just to have 2 different data points in order to see how things are doing, if our furnace is working properly, or if our air conditioners are working properly. We also put one of these in our fridge, because these RV fridges, although most of the time they work just fine, sometimes they get a little too warm. Either the fan's going out and you just don't realize it, or some other issue is going on in your RV and you don't really want to take a bite into some spoiled food and get sick without knowing that you're having an issue. Speaking of humidity, if you do live in areas, well, probably not the desert, but other areas of the country, or you're going to be traveling to other areas of the country that do have high humidity, definitely get one of these guys, especially if it's not going to be a very hot day where the air conditioner can kind of help dehumidify your air. If you're in a mild temperate zone and it's still very humid, it's going to get very humid in your RV, and that can cause mold pretty quickly, and it can cause damage to furniture. And the last but definitely not least piece of equipment or upgrade I would get for your RV is an air compressor. Whether you're traveling by weekend, traveling full time, if you get some sort of issue where you have some low tires, you always need to keep those things topped off to the right air pressure. Otherwise, you could find yourself in a heap of trouble. So if you guys have any more upgrades or tips you'd like to give to other people, either living on the road or just starting out full time, what are some other pieces of gear that you find essential or helpful as you go about your travels? As always, guys, if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like it. You can also check us out at DnSAdventures.com. And as always, adventure on.